Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. Today we have part 3 of my Trash to Treasure series, in which I upcycle an old light fitting which I found next to my mum's bin. In the previous 2 episodes I made a toast rack for our cafe, and then after that I made a hot air balloon lamp which I was really happy with. But today I'm going to be making a lampshade for my bedroom. It's kind of still upcycling. It was a light fitting, now it's a lampshade, but yeah, that's what I will be doing today. So if that sounds interesting, stay tuned and enjoy the video. Just in case you haven't seen any of the previous episodes, I just wanted to give a recap of the dismantling of the light fitting. It was old and rusty and it was a mess, but the parts from the light fitting provided everything I would need for all 4 projects in this upcycling series. For my first 2 upcycling projects, I used the prongs from the light fitting. This time I've decided to use the frame, and on this part of the frame, as you can see, it's got all of those pre-drilled holes, and I decided I was going to use like rectangular pendants on each of the holes, so it's almost like a chandelier effect with the pendants hanging down. And for those pendants I decided to use bookmark moulds. I thought they would be just right for this project. I bought 2 packs of 10 moulds because they were quite cheap, and I thought that way I can just pour loads all at once and it will be a really quick and easy project to do. So I mixed up some epoxy resin. I thought I'd calculated it correctly, but I did actually mix too much, but you'll see what I did with that later. And I don't know if you can tell, but it's starting to go a little bit yellow. It's quite an old bottle, well, 2 bottles that I had, and if it starts to go yellow, it's not a problem really. As long as you're using pigment, you won't be able to tell. Yellowing is only really a problem if you're doing a clear piece, or if you're just doing something that's just white that would show the yellow over time, because epoxy resin, all of it does yellow over time. Some of it just takes a lot longer than others. Anyway, I'm waffling now. I've used some pearl white mica powder for 1/2 of the epoxy resin, and for the other half I'm using greys and browns kind of mixed together. I wanted a fawn kind of colour, a grey brown kind of colour. That's what I had in my mind anyway. And the pigments are from Arteza. These pendants are going to be on the top row on that frame, which is the biggest row, and there were 18 holes. I'm actually doing 20 because I knew I'd mixed a bit too much, and I thought it's always good to have some spare. I could always use them as bookmarks afterwards if I didn't need them. So yeah, I'm doing 20 here, and I decided to have white at the bottom and the browny grey colour at the top, and I was hoping they would merge in the middle, so you get like an ombre effect. That was the plan anyway. And my plan was for the next 2 layers to gradually go darker. To be honest, the whole thing was a little bit of a gamble. I didn't know how this was going to look when it was all finished. I was slightly nervous with this project, I've got to admit. Right, while they started to cure, I took my hexagonal coaster mould from Moulds and Shapes, and I just used those 2 lots of resin layered up in like a puddle effect. I didn't have very high expectations because there's not a lot you can do with 2 colours, especially when you haven't had time to really think about it and your resin's starting to warm up. You've just got to get it in there. So I just alternately poured in the colours and hoped for the best. and you will see at the end how my coasters turned out. I did do the same thing with the second lot of colours for my next rows, because again, when I did the next rows, I still mixed up too much, even though I thought I'd done less. Yeah. So yeah, I didn't film making the second lot of coasters, but I will show you all of them at the end because they actually turned out quite nice. Okay, let's pour the next 2 rows. The second row needed 12 pendants and the bottom row needed 6, so I had enough mould to do it all in one go. And for the second row, I decided to use the same colour as before, but without the white, so that I would get a darker effect. And I put a little bit more pigment in as well. So it's the, oh gosh, I can't remember the names. I think it was slate grey or something like that. I'll put it on the screen, and caramel brown mixed together. And I just very simply poured it in for that middle row. For the bottom row, I used the same resin in the same colour, no extra pigment added, but I decided to add some sparkle. I found some brown glitter and some goldy colour. It's not exactly gold, that goldy coloured glitter. I don't know what you would call it. It's got a hue of brown in it, so it was a goldy brown. I didn't want it to be too sparkly and glamorous. I don't really go for that. It's just not me, but I wanted just a little bit of interest in there, and so yeah, I added some of that as well and poured that in, and then we were ready for the next step. Right, to attach all the pendants to the frame, I needed some jump rings, and I didn't have enough in my jewellery supplies for the whole lamp, so I made my own. I took some 1mm silver wire and coiled it round a pen, which I'd worked out was about the right size for the jump rings I needed, and then it was just a case of snipping down the middle. Unfortunately, my snippers aren't as sharp as I thought they were, so it took a lot longer to snip down the middle than I was expecting, but I got there in the end, and then I had all the jump rings that I needed. Right, now for the part that caused me the biggest dilemma: how to make the frame into a lampshade frame so that it had that bit on the top that would slide up over the light fitting and stay in position. I wasn't sure how I was going to do that, but in the end I bought 2 of those light shade extensions, I think they're called, and decided to sandwich that part of the frame that you can see in the middle between the 2 pieces with some epoxy putty. The idea, if you were going to do this properly, you would probably weld it or solder it or something, but that's not something I'm very good at. I've tried, and I'm sure I would be perfectly able to do that if I knew what I was doing, but I'm doing something wrong because every time I try, it doesn't work. So I gave up. And so that's why I'm doing this. And this epoxy putty is so good. I've never tried it before. And you just cut 2 equal parts and mix it together. And I think you've got about 8 minutes working time. And you can shape it into sausage kind of, or worm shapes and put it into position. And then I just sandwiched it together. And, that once it was cured the next day, it's really, really tough and hard and strong. So it solved my problem of not wanting to, or not being able to do soldering or welding. Yeah, there's always a way, isn't there? I don't like to be put off just because I can't do something. I can always find a different way, and that's the best thing, really, isn't it? To be able to find a way not to give up. Right then, once the pendants were cured, I had to attach them off camera because it was just too fiddly to film. And I tried to film what it looked like part way through, but I struggled because I had to have it elevated, and yeah, it's not easy for you to see what's going on here, but I will show you it when it was all completed, because really there's not much to explain. I just used the jump rings to attach each piece. So here it is, all finished and assembled, and I'm kind of happy with it. I would have liked it if the holes were closer together and the pendants were wider, so the gaps between them weren't so big, but it just about works for me. What do you think? We needed a light shade for our bedroom because we haven't been in this house long and we're still kind of unorganised. We haven't decorated or anything like that yet. So most of the lights don't have lampshades yet. And so it was nice to get a lampshade up, and I think it looks quite nice. As I said before, I wanted to show you the coasters which I'd made, and here they are. I think they turned out good too. They're fairly simple and plain. I did think about putting some decals on the top of the very plain ones, but even as they are, I think they're quite nice. So that's the third thing completed from that one light fitting that I found near my mum's bin. And I'm quite pleased that I've been able to make 3 things so far with all the bits from the light fitting. Yeah, it's quite satisfying to see the difference, of something that was just going to go into the landfill. Yeah, I feel quite pleased with myself. So join me next week for the last part in the series, where I'll make one more project from that one light fitting, and I will see you again then. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.